The contents of this interview, or from Awake and Empowered Expo LLC from Ethann Fox and Flower of Life Center for Human Evolution, is for informational purposes only and does not necessarily reflect the viewpoints held by these organizations or individuals. Always consult with your doctor or health professional before making any changes to your diet, lifestyle, or prescription drug use. Please understand that you assume all responsibility and risk for the use or misuse of this information.
Welcome to Awake and Empowered Radio. This is Ethann Fox. Today I have the pleasure of speaking with Sterling Allan on the fascinating and unique subject of alphabetics, an area of study that he pioneered 20 years ago. This is the first time that Sterling has been interviewed on this subject. Alphabetics is a universal code that is prevalent in spiritual and religious texts, as well as in our day-to-day lives. Understanding this system will uncover an entirely new layer of information and will enhance your perception of your reality. Hi Sterling, welcome to our show today. I'm really happy to have you back on. Last time we previously interviewed on the subject of free energy and technological advancements, and it was just an amazing interview, just full of so much incredible information that I didn't even know about. And in this conversation, though, and I sort of ended the last interview with the question, which I don't know if I actually kept that in the final recording, but I noticed that you have a background in alphabetics, and I'd never even heard of that, and I couldn't find anything online about that other than work that you'd done. But what I'd like to know is, what are the origins of the term alphabetics, or is this a word that you came up with to explain this area of work?
It is something I discovered, and I did coin that term, alphabetics, to describe the phenomena. And this is the first interview I am doing on this subject, so we're in virgin territory here. And the thing that's amazing about this is that this is not new material. I was like 1997 when I started coming up with this stuff, finding it and doing some writing and talking about it to friends and stuff. And I don't fully understand the reasons why. We can go into some of that. And really quickly, there's a scripture, 2 Thessalonians said that God will send them strong delusions that they will believe a lie. In other words, God is so fed up with people's blindness that he says, fine, you want to be deceived? I'll kind of make it even easier for you to be deceived. I'll make it hard for you to see the truth and easy for you to see the lies. And you know, whether or not you believe in the Bible, the audience, you know, that's an interesting prophecy, that's for sure. That God says he would send strong delusions that they would believe a lie. And I believe that it's the nature of the deception that we're in these times. This alphabetics code is an antidote. It's like the parables that Jesus taught in his day, that were for the eyes to see, and those who have eyes to see and ears to hear, they would get it, and those who didn't wouldn't. So he would speak in these little parables, and people who had eyes to see would go, I know what he's saying. Man, he just really, really reamed the Pharisees a new one there, and the Pharisees was like, what did he just say? And they could tell it was probably not a positive thing that he just had to say about them, but they kind of didn't get it. And that's what these alphabetics are about. They're a modern parable, and they're like the hidden picture on the wall. You know, you do those little hidden pictures where look for the man carrying the cart, and you look and you look and you look, and there all of a sudden you see it and it stands out like a sore thumb. Because now once you see it, it's obvious. And these things are the same way. They're tucked away nicely so that if you're not looking for them, you definitely don't see them. And once you're looking for them, it's hard to find them. But once you see them, it's like, oh, holy cow, that is like, okay, that's definitely a man pulling a cart, and it's tucked away right in the middle of this little tree and these branches. And you never think to see it, but there it is. And you know what I'm talking about? Like once you see it, it's really obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then I have another question that comes out of that. So, if that's true, then who wrote these texts, like the Bible and the Book of Mormon? And did they obviously someone must have intentionally put this knowledge in there? I mean, a lot of people take these books literally to mean this was the life of Jesus and this is his teachings and so on. How should we be looking at these ancient texts and why they were created?
Well, that's the cool thing about these codes is I don't think they were put there intentionally by humans. They're a function of what I call resonance, which we all understand what resonance is. If you push the depressor pedal on the piano, some people call it the loud pedal, um, to sustain the notes, you push that pedal down and then you sing an F, the F chord on that octave on the piano will start vibrating. Have you ever done that before?
I'm familiar with what you're talking about. I don't know that I've done that by myself before, but I totally get it. Yeah.
Same thing with tuning forks. You can take two tuning forks of the same pitch. You ring one of them and the other one starts ringing because this resonance kicks in. And it has to do with being on the same vibration, and it's totally science. It's just a principle of things that are in resonance with each other will resonate. When I gave a presentation about this, it's the first public presentation that's been done on it in Boulder at the Global BEM conference last October. I did a little demonstration, which is something you can do. It's quite simple. You take a string and you suspend little like washers, for example, the same length from that string, using like thread or something that is not too heavy. You want it to be able to vibrate back and forth or swing back and forth like a swing. And then you take a couple of lengths that are the same, a couple of those washers that are the same length of thread suspending them. And then you take 2 or 3 others that are not the same length and you also suspend them from that string. So let's say you've got 5 washers dangling from this string that is horizontal. So you've got 5 vertical washers hanging from this, and they're different lengths, except 2 of them are the same length. And because they're the same length, you could argue, well, they're going to resonate, right? So here's what you do. You take one of the washers that's the same length as the other one, you lift it up and you let it start swinging back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And after maybe 20 seconds or so, the second washer that's the same length starts swinging at the same magnitude as the first one. The first one is dampened and the second one picks up that strength. And so it actually starts swinging more than the other one. And the other one almost goes to a stop, and then they kind of go back and forth. They give each other their bounce, so to speak. One of them goes higher, one of them, then the other one goes higher. But they're basically, because they're in resonance, they cause the other one to vibrate, while the other ones, they're wiggling, but they're not vibrating. They're not swinging back and forth on the string. Whereas the one that's the same length starts swinging back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, the same as the first one you started swinging. And it's resonance because it's the same length. It's the same distance. It's a mathematical equation. This is science. This is not woo-woo. This is not. And so that's why you can take words numbered in the Old and New Testament lexicon, look them up, like, for example, the 801, for example. 801 is the Utah area code for most of Utah. And then they've got 435 for the rural areas, and then they started another one, 385, maybe 5 years ago, a new area code also in the surrounding areas. So 801 is like Salt Lake City, Utah Valley, and the word 801 in the New Testament lexicon, this is just numbering all the words alphabetically like you do a dictionary. You say, okay, here's all the words that are in the Greek New Testament. Let's list them alphabetically. Ob is the first one, and you go down to the very last word, which is Z something, because the Greek alphabet is similar to the English alphabet. The sequence and the letters are quite similar. Same with the Hebrew. The first letter in the Hebrew alphabet is Aleph. The first letter in the Greek alphabet is it's Aleph in the Hebrew, Alpha in the Greek. And So you've got basically word number, the 801st word in the Greek New Testament lexicon. This is word numbering all the words in the. This is a comprehensive listing of all the words, no more, no less, that appear in the Greek New Testament. And it just so happens that word number 801 means foolish. And you would say, if you're not familiar with this code, like looking at the picture of the forest, and I'm looking for the picture of the man pulling the cart, and when I start looking for it, all of a sudden it's going to stand out. And if I'm looking for correlations, all of a sudden you're going to start saying, wow, that's pretty interesting, because in the scriptures and the prophecies, there's this parable about the wise and foolish virgins. And it just so happens that word 801 for Utah is foolish. That doesn't mean that everyone in Utah or everyone with the area code 801 or phone number 801 is foolish, because you can also take the opposite. The opposite is wise. But I just find that very, very interesting.
So, well, how do you think that applies to Utah in this case?
Well, it's basically saying the Mormons look at themselves as the Lord's chosen people in the latter days, like the Jews were at his first coming. The Mormons are his chosen people for his second coming. And so if anyone on the planet should be the wise virgin spoken of in the Bible, it would be the Mormons, right? And yet word 801 in the New Testament lexicon says foolish. It gives it the opposite rendering. So it's polemic. It's basically saying everything's upside down. The people who are supposed to be the people of the Lord are denying him, are rejecting him, are doing the opposite of what they're supposed to be doing. There's a subset, there's a remnant who are awake and who are trying to be good. The patriots in Utah are being persecuted by the church, who's supposed to be embracing and promoting the very causes that the patriot Mormons are. So, for example, we have Mormon Stephen E. Jones, professor at BYU, who did these studies about nanothermite in the buildings that fell on September 11th in New York City. And he said that basically this is a smoking gun. We have nanothermite in the wreckage, in the dust collected from several places with a solid chain of custody, showing that this dust did come from the wreckage, and it's got nanothermite in it, which is a telltale sign of implosions, of just demolition. This is military grade stuff. This is not stuff that terrorists are going to have their hands on. This is high-end stuff. And this is very well explains why those buildings could fall at free fall speed. So he starts, he wakes up a lot of people. The 911 engineers for 9/11 Truth starts in large measure because of his work. Not exclusively, but in large measure, he had a lot to do with that. And they were pinpointing, we have Dick Cheney as being the guy who was the main force behind planning and implementing the events on September 11th from the inside government position. And the 9/11 Truth movement was honing in on Dick Cheney, and his days were numbered. What happened? BYU invited Dick Cheney to speak at their commencement exercises. And what happened was that whole thrust and momentum to put him on the judgment seat, so to speak, and say what's going on, and basically in the Nuremberg trials kind of situation, he basically got a pass because people basically said, well, if this conservative Mormon church is going to be honoring him at their commencement exercise, he can't be all that bad, right? And so instead of being the ones who are blowing the whistle for the truth movement, the Mormon church is in part of the sequestering of information and the cover-up of the conspirators who pulled that thing off. So instead of being a light to the world and the savers of men that they're supposed to be on issues of freedom and the Constitution to promulgate this to all the world, they are actually in bed with the conspirators who are trying to bring about a socialist new world order. So it's no surprise to me that word number 801, which is the zip code for Utah, the area code, the telephone prefix for Utah, for much the central Salt Lake, Utah valleys, the heart of Utah, 801 means foolish. That's like God's way of saying, you guys are upside down, get your act together.
Now, I believe, since you brought up the subject of 9/11, didn't you have some research from using Alphabetics into the 9/11 situation?
Yeah, I looked up words number 9/11, pages number, chapter, verse, chapter 9, verse 11. In fact, that book, The Harbinger, that is really popular about the scripture in Isaiah 9, verse 11, that talks about we have built with hewn stones. We were, the towers have fallen down. We will rebuild them with hewn stones, and we'll make it even better than before, which is a boast of the wicked people, basically saying we're impervious to God's rebuke. We're oblivious to what he's doing here. We're going to keep on going as we have done, and even better. And God's going, oh, no, not quite so, not so fast. And basically the end of the prophecy there was that the people were destroyed. That was a harbinger. And the book, The Harbinger, shows how that scripture ties into what happened on September 11th, where the leaders of our government, Bush, and Obama, and the secretaries of state, quoted that scripture as if it was saying a positive thing, oblivious to the fact that it is a commentary on the wicked people that are about to be destroyed. They actually inscribed that statement on the tower, the new tower that's been built. Obama inscribed that scripture on the last beam to be installed, to be hoisted and to be installed as the head capstone, so to speak, of this building, which is chapter 9, verse 11. 9/11.
Do you think that they know that they're doing this, or
No,
okay?
no,
So
no.
so what you're saying is, if I'm understanding correctly, you're basically saying that we live in this holographic universe, and every small part contains within it the bigger the bigger part. And so in one sense, I'm speaking in this term because I've been a student of astrology and numerology for 20 years, and a lot of people are confused by how can planets control our lives, and I don't really see it that way. I see it sort of as they're a representation, or sort of like an outer representation of what's happening, within. And so in a similar way, it sounds like what you're saying is there's this consciousness or energy that exists in the universe, and these books, while they were not written with the intention of putting these codes in them, that energy or consciousness is imbued within everything, and it just so happens that we can decode that message from these various books to get this information. Am I even on the right track?
That's a beautiful example to illustrate, and I think argue in favor of the whole principle of alphabetics and why this works. It has to do with resonance. It has to do with being in harmony, and things just line up because they just, if you've seen how you can take sand on the top of a table and put a speaker underneath it, and the thing will start vibrating into different patterns depending on the frequency. As it goes higher, they get smaller, and as you lower, there are fewer repeating patterns based on the vibrating sound waves that cause the sand to go into certain patterns. And so that basically is the same thing that's going on here. The word 801 in the New Testament lexicon, because of the principle of resonance and vibration, just happens to line up with the meaning of 801 as a telephone area prefix in Utah. This is central Utah, or I should say the heart of Utah, Salt Lake Valley and Utah valleys, the two valleys up there where the bulk of the population in Utah is, which is where the Mormon headquarters are. And I could, when I discovered this code, at first it was like, that's interesting. And of course, being a scientist, I wanted to see repetition of the phenomena. And I can tell you that from the principle of repetition and consistency, there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that there's something very substantial to this principle of alphabetics, that it is rock solid. Now, that said, that doesn't mean that my interpretation of the code is always going to be correct. I might read something into it that might be a little off. That's okay. You know, it's kind of like you got a lot of different people giving horoscope readings and predictions, and you know, there's some that are excellent, some that are not even close to being on. It's the same thing. I mean, the phenomena is real. The people who play with it are going to be at various levels of acumen in their ability to see the code, interpret it accurately, or to, and that's, you know, I imagine one of the questions you'd have for me has to do with accuracy, as you know, how accurate are these codes? And I can tell you that from my experience, and I have found thousands of correlations. I'm not exaggerating. I mean, the number 100 is easily on the low end of the number of very solid correlations that I've looked up, where I've looked up a zip code, a phone number, address, a social security number, a date, a time on a clock, a code that came in the mail for a special package. This principle of resonance is there. It's definite. There's no doubt about it. And I can give you a few more really solid examples just to show you how rock solid this is, that this is not a coincidence. This is not just, well, you know, 801, that's kind of interesting, but that just happens to have some correlation, but you're grasping at straws here, because you know that they didn't pick that number. It was just assigned randomly by the telephone association, or however that number came about. And I'm going, you know what? Have you ever noticed, for example, on YouTube, you're watching a video and they have those numbers that are signed, there's like 10 digits for the YouTube video, that are totally randomly assigned by some algorithm in Google's computer somewhere. And sometimes you see words in there, and they seem to have some relevance to the subject matter. We had one of these happen last week, where the word FUD jackal, and jackal was in all caps, JACKLE. And it was small f, capital U, small d, so FUD, and then jackal. It was like 7x FUD jackal. And, you know, there's I don't really see any huge significance there, but I can't just help but wonder that the angels have the ability to manipulate things. There's this principle of resonance. You put the sand on the top of the table, you put a speaker underneath it, and it just happens to line up in these patterns because of resonance. And it's the same thing. You'll see these, you know, numbers that are supposedly randomly assigned being very relevant. I've had this code, like I said, since 96 is when 96, 97 is when I just pulled this out and really dug into it and spent a lot of time on it. And, you know, that's almost 20 years ago. So I'm just saying that the to find the level of I've looked up my phone numbers. I've looked up I mean, we're talking so specific as it's describing what happened in that house while we lived there. We had kids, a couple of kids, and we were, kids were running around in diapers during that phase, and that's what that phone number corresponds to in the lexicon. I mean, it's crazy, and yet it's there. And so I'm not going to ignore it. I'm not going to just say, well, this must be just a coincidence. I feel like I have a mission to note these things, to point them out, and to bring it to other people's attention. And the fact is that people have been ignoring it. They have not been paying attention to this. They have been ignoring the warnings. They have been, like you said, when you did a search about Alphabetics, the only thing you could find was my work. I've never done any interviews until this one with you, almost 20 years after discovering this. I've tried to get on Coast to Coast. I've tried to get on, not that I haven't tried to talk about this stuff. It's just people don't want to hear it. It's just, I don't know if they think it's too crazy. They don't think, they don't, to me, it is so astonishing. I'm in tears oftentimes when I find this stuff. It's so amazing. And it's so specific. I mean, we could, right now, just as a test, you could give me the last 4 digits of your phone number, and I'd be glad to do this, and I could look it up. I'll tell you what the definitions are, and I bet you there's a 99.9% chance that you're going to say, wow, that's pretty amazing. It's like horoscope. People who first encounter horoscope, they look it up and go, well, I can see there's some relevance to me there or to this date or what happened on that day. They can see the correlation. They might not take it seriously. They might not guide their lives by it, and that's okay, but they do see that there's something there. We would see that there's something there. Okay. I don't know the last 4 numbers if you did. We've not gone through this before, so
sure.
If you want to, we could do that.
Yeah, I'm up for it. I have 3 separate phone numbers, but it'd be interesting to see if you noticed any differences between them, because I use them for different reasons sometimes. But
yeah, I've found that you can take an entire day looking up stuff on somebody. Their name. You insert their name alphabetically, and you see what the words are around it. You look up the phone numbers. You look up their addresses. I mean, this can take a lot of time, and so. Just since we don't have time to look up all your stuff, take the phone number that you feel like is most reflective of you, whether it's your cell phone or your business line, the one you've had the longest, the one that is like the closest to representing who Ethann Fox is about.
Well, I recently changed all my phone numbers, and actually, you probably don't know, I actually changed my name about 2 years ago as well. So the life that I'm living now is quite a bit different than the life that I had before. So
what we could do is we could take 2 data points. We could take one right now to a new phone number that you have, and we could take one from 2 years ago, and we could see the difference.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. All right. So the new phone number.
Last 4.
0384.
Okay. And that's the new one. And then what about the previous one?
0489.
Okay. Well, I know both of them are going to be pretty cool because I've looked up stuff along these lines. Let's see, 384. So I'm just going to the Complete Word Study Dictionary of the New Testament by Zodiates. James Strong is the one who did all the numbering of the words, and this is one of many people who've written lexicons where he comes in with his own study about what the etymology of the words are and where they're used in the scriptures and how to format it and all that kind of stuff. But the definitions are going to be the same across the board, whatever lexicon you look them up in. Okay, I'm just telling you for a frame of reference of what book I'm looking this up in. I'm looking up word 384, and first of all, worth.
This is going to be good, huh?
Yeah. Well, one thing we've not talked about is because of the principle of resonance, think of yourself tuning the radio on an old-fashioned radio where you turn the knob and you dial into a certain radio station, And as you get closer to it, it gets stronger and stronger and stronger, and the static goes away, and it comes in with this clear signal. And you can move that knob if it's a really strong station, a local station that's got a lot of kilowatt, production in their broadcast. You can move the dial quite a bit and still get a solid, clear signal, right?
Right.
And so if you had a digital readout on that knob, might be 97.03 to 98.98. And everything in between there is a solid signal. And then as you go before and after that, it might start getting fuzzy, and then maybe, twice that distance away, it's getting, you don't have any semblance of that radio station. You can't make anything out, right?
Correct, yeah.
Same thing holds true in Alphabetics. You don't just look up a one word and a number. You look up the words before and after it, several words away. And the more significant that word or phrase or number is, the greater distance you can go away from it and still find resonance or relevance. That makes sense?
Yep. Okay.
So first of all, the word right after it, these are things that are highlighted in my book. You're going to love this. 385, I mentioned earlier, this is on the recording, that the area code in Utah now has 3 area codes, and the most recent one is 385.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Right.
So you're one word away from 385. 384 is just neighboring word. Okay?
Okay.
And the word right before it, I've got it marked to move or stir up. In the New Testament, used with reference to stirring up the multitude or people. And I can tell you, knowing what I know about you, see, I've got this highlighted because my nickname is Stir. Okay? That's what growing up, people call me Stir. And yeah, of course, now I live up to that, both the Sterling, the idea of, the Sterling character, and to stir things up. Both of those have relevance in my life. And so I've got that highlighted, and I know that applies to you too, because this very radio station and consciousness that you're all about is all about stirring people up, waking people up, getting them to think, right?
Right, absolutely, that's true.
Okay, now, this is interesting. I'm now reading word number 384, which is the exact number. So this, if we were turning channels to a station, that would be what you would be giving over the radio. This is channel 384, right? This means to pack up baggage and so forth in order to remove, hence to subvert or unsettle. And the thing is, you can sit there and you can read this and think about it, and you can go really deep in the applications. And I'm just going to starting what's coming to me, like if I was doing a horoscope reading on you, this, I do have a gift on this particular, on Alphabetics, having done a lot of time with this. But on the superficial level, what was it you said about this number before I even looked it up? You said it was new, and that you had changed, and that you both changed your name and you have all new phone numbers, right?
The 0384 is the new one. The other one I had for many years. I used it in business, and I only recently just finally canceled it, and I just fell back to the 384.
Right.
Yeah.
And so this very meaning, to pack up baggage and so forth in order to remove, hence to subvert or unsettle, I think conveys that idea of this is like a new thing for you. You're getting rid of old baggage. You're starting over. This is like a new beginning. And so you can take the opposite. The antonym of this word is to build again, to build up, to establish, to strengthen, to make firm, to confirm, to establish. I see those words as being very relevant to what you described about, new beginnings, or, kind of getting a new footing, so to speak.
Right. Well, yeah, the direction I've been going in my life has dramatically changed in the last couple of years. Not just my name change is just a representation of that, but yes, for sure, I've redirected my focus. and really become more focused on making changes in the world, waking people up, like you said.
And look at these synonyms, taking the positive meanings of stirring things up, being a revolutionary, so to speak, to disturb, to overthrow, to turn inside out, to distort, to transform into something of an opposite character. There's a prophecy, a messianic prophecy, and there's several actually with wording to this effect, that I will overturn until he comes whose right it is. That basically everything in society, David Icke says everything is upside down. Doctors destroy health. Universities destroy knowledge. Mainstream media destroys information. And religions destroy spirituality. They do the opposite of what they're supposed to be doing, because people are tied up in their ego, they're tied up in this deception, they're asleep at the wheel. The Mormons, who are supposed to be preparing for the second coming, are actually emboldening the establishment of the New World Order.
So let's assume that, like you were saying earlier, when you resonate, or when you put a certain frequency to sand, it will form a certain pattern. And so let's say that frequency is the frequency of all of consciousness. So there is this consciousness that's out there that is creating a certain frequency, and obviously there are a variety of different consciousnesses out there, some that are higher and some that are very low, that are all impregnating their pattern on our life experience and reality that we have here on Earth. So all these patterns are going on and colliding with one another, I assume, in some way, to create the final result of the pattern that we experience. So am I on the right track for so far?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. So what about free will? Does it play any role at all? And if so, to what extent? Or is free will already assumed in the frequency of the universe or God? Like, for example, going back to your earlier example, when you said Obama engraved this scripture into the World Trade Center Memorial, we would think that this was his free will that caused him to make this decision, but it would seem that that his actions are already assumed in Alphabetics.
Well, that is definitely a question that comes up early on when considering things like Bible code and Alphabetics, which is a variation of a Bible code type of phenomena. Let me say this. My understanding of spirituality, of God, of the universe, is that the most important principle, bar none, is free will. Our right to choose. That God honors that. And that's why there's wickedness in the world, is because he lets us choose and to live with our consequences. And then, he tries to guide us to improve things, to work through us, to get a clue and to fix things and clean things up, but he's not going to force us. And see, that's Satan's program. The devil's program is to force us, to take away free will. That's what the New World Order is all about, is forcing us to be utopian. You will take care of the poor through this socialist program. You will take care of the roads. You will, government oversight, and the bigger the government is, the more control they have, the less free will we have. And that is basically Satan's kingdom on earth, is what the New World Order is all about. And because it instead of allowing us to choose to take care of one another, it forces us to take care of one another. And the codes in the Bible are not about predestination and fate. They're about guidance and inspiration and probable futures and choices. As you look up this number, this is not saying this is what you are. You have no way of choosing, because there's an antonym with every. I mean, I lived when I was discovering this code. Guess what my address was? 666 South, 60 East in Ephraim, Utah. And Ephraim is on page 666 of the LDS Bible Dictionary. So I had it twice. The city I was living in is on page 666, and my phone number, or my house address, was 666. And I chose to manifest the opposite. Say, okay, I'm going to claim the opposite. I'm one of God's players, not one of Satan's players. And every word, a good example of this is the word cleave. Thou shalt cleave unto thy wife and none other. Cleave also means cleaver, to separate, to utterly separate. Exact same pronunciation, exact same spelling, means the exact opposite thing. It means to adhere to completely, and it means to utterly separate. And the only way you know the difference is by the context. So if I say, I'm going to cleave you from my inheritance, and you will never have any more to do with my inheritance, you know what he meant by cleave. If he says, I want you to cleave to this woman to be your wife forever and ever, you know it means to adhere. But the only thing that gives you the understanding is the context. And every word, every number has an opposite. And what that enables you to do is to keep free will intact. Say, okay, I looked up my phone number. It has such and such. It says the wickedest one on the planet. I'm going to choose the opposite. The free will is completely intact. Or you could say, well, okay, fine, that describes me very well. I'm going to keep up my wicked deeds and continue to be to do the most wicked I can do. It's totally up to you. It's up to you what you're going to do with what the code says.
But if our reality is a combination of these different frequencies of consciousness that are impregnating themselves upon our reality and creating certain kinds of outcomes, how can we express free will and overcome those energies, specifically the lower energies that are holding us back as a consciousness right now?
Look at what you did. You changed your name. You said the name that I have, that I was given at birth, does not resonate with who I want to be. I'm going to take measures to change my name legally so that I am now Ethann Fox. I'm no longer whatever your name was before. And you changed it. You changed your phone numbers. And you didn't know about Alphabetics. You didn't know about the resonance of numbers and stuff like that. You just felt to do that. Let me just point something out really quick before we get too far away from this. I want to point out that on the top of my page where your phone number 384 is listed, I have that it's on page 159, and I have notated in pen, thematic of 159 is 435, which, okay, that's actually, I take that back. That doesn't have relevance to you. It has relevance to Utah. 435 is one of the area codes. 835 and 435 are therefore represented on this page. But 489 is your present or your previous prefix, and that is a prefix in that I looked up because I lived in Mapleton, Utah at the time I was discovering these things. And that was my phone prefix, 801, 489, and then whatever the last four digits were. And there's some really cool stuff in there having to do with a messianic mission in the latter days to bring about a better world. And when I say that, remember that there are 144,000 people, and that's just a quorum number. It's not a literal number of people who are going to be become ones mighty and strong on behalf of God to carry out a messianic type of role for humanity. And so I can tell you right now that 489 ties in very strongly to that whole theme. And it's like really close to the word Messiah, if I remember right. But back to the idea of predestination, and there's so many free will. Just from my experience and observation, absolutely, God honors free will above all other things. He wants us to choose to be good. He doesn't want to force us to be good. That's Satan's program. And Satan, the devil, whatever you want to call that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So basically, by changing my name, which, by the way, I did it on purpose to achieve a certain kind of numerology, um, and so that sort of follows what you're saying. Because numerology of a name has a certain frequency that resonates out to the universe and brings back a certain experience. And so it sounds like what you're saying is to alter our reality and to raise our vibration so that we're not affected by these lower consciousness energies that are affecting our material reality. We need to take steps in our individual lives to alter the frequency of our experience, whether it be change our name or maybe to do certain spiritual practices or drink certain teas or whatever things may have a frequency that is more in line with the reality we want to create, or think a certain way, for example. I mean, is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, and you have to weigh a lot of different things in making decisions like that. You want to be in your family. You want to be where your work is. You want to be, you could just go down to the post office and have them change it by a couple of digits, and it might cost, $20. And be a pain to have to, update all your contacts. My new contact information is such and such. There are a lot of things to weigh when going through something like this. I have found Alphabetics to be very poor when it comes to being a predictive, like here's what's going to happen in the future based on what, a number might mean on a certain date or a certain year. Because I believe it falls back to human agency and our right to choose, and that nothing is cast in stone, that it is always up to us what kind of reality we're going to create, both individually and as a community, as well as societally in the world. That our world is a collective representation of our collective choices. And right now, our collective choices have led to collective tyranny. That's what's coming down on us right now. And we're going to wake up. We're going to, when things get bad enough, we're going to be like the addict who hits the wall and comes to their senses and realizes they've made a mistake and turn to God and clean things up and fix things once and for all. That's in our future. I believe that's our destiny. That doesn't mean we have to do that. We could just go totally into meltdown and go into complete obliteration, like that planet was between us and between Mars and the next planet out. Now it's just an asteroid belt. Whatever was out there used to be a planet. You look at the NASA's chart of asteroids and of meteors and of debris in our known solar system, and you see this huge belt, just one planet outside of Mars, there's no doubt in my mind that used to be a planet, and it was blown to smithereens. Either it was hit by an incoming, or they blew it up themselves, or someone else blew it up. That used to be a planet, and it could have been inhabited.
So tell me, we got a little far ahead here, but I want to go back and hear a little of your life story and early inspirations that led you to this study, because I mean, usually you'll see the hints of these sorts of interests early on. Do you have anything relevant there?
The thing that kind of, there's a really long history, and I'll try and give you a short version of that. That led to this discovery. I see this as being an advanced version of some earlier studies that I did. When I was about 25 years old, a student at BYU, I started writing a book called The Vision of All. There's a prophecy in Isaiah 29, the vision of all is come unto you as the words of a book that is sealed. And I was basically showing that the Book of Mormon history serves as a prophetic microcosm to the macrocosm of world history and to the microcosm of individual progression through life, that we follow the same progressional patterns from beginning to end. and that you can line these things up like a zipper on your pants, just zip, 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 and this goes with this goes with this goes with this, and it's in chronological sequence. The same history that you see unfold in the Book of Mormon is a template or a parallel to the history of the house of Israel from beginning to end that's told in the Bible. That was part A of the book, and part B of the book was showing that same template as paralleling an individual spiritual progression from infant to full adult and fully spiritually mature and developed in God and fully come into the spiritual fullness. For example, in the Book of Mormon, there's an appearance of Jesus Christ to the Nephites after their destruction, and that parallels the prophesied destruction in the latter days, in these end times, when Jesus is supposed to show up to the whole planet, and a new millennium is ushered in. The Book of Mormon describes that whole scenario in a microcosm of their history. And that parallels an individual who has the right and destiny to come into the presence of God and walk with God on an intimate basis, where God is like their friend, not this untouchable guy who sits up on a pedestal somewhere and you hope that you might be able to get through sometimes. That is the history. That's a book that I wrote called The Vision of All. After I wrote that book, I started an organization called the American Study Group. The then president of the Mormon Church was Ezra Taft Benson, and he told us in a general conference that we should study what the scriptures, what the prophets have to say about the Constitution and the threats to it. So I started a group to do that, the American Study Group. We would meet on a weekly basis to study what the prophets, ancient and modern, have had to say about the Constitution, the principles of freedom, and the threats to it. And this spread throughout the Rocky Mountain West. And also during that time, I started finding chiasms and parallels in the scriptures. This is something I didn't come up with. The chiasm is a pattern A, B, B, A. The first shall be last, the last shall be first. That's a chiasm. A, B, B, A. The first shall be last, the last shall be first. So you say something and then you reverse it. And I started finding chiasms in the Book of Mormon, in the Bible, and in parallels. And I went way beyond anything I've ever seen anyone else do before. I started a magazine called Greater Things, where I would publish these things that I was finding. For example, I found a parallel between Isaiah 28 and 2 Nephi 28. And 2 Nephi 28 in the Book of Mormon is not a quotation of Isaiah 28. There's a lot of Isaiah quotations in the Book of Mormon where they basically repeat an entire chapter of Isaiah. There's about 20 or so chapters of Isaiah that are repeated verbatim almost in the Book of Mormon. This is not one of those. The chapter before or after it, I can't remember which, I think it's right after it is, but this one is not. And there are 250 consecutive parallels between Isaiah 28 and 2 Nephi 28. Ding, 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 ding. And one of the really obvious ones is the wording line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. That wording is in one verse in Isaiah, in 2 Nephi 28, and is also in Isaiah 28, and they line up in that parallel so that they're like coincided right next to each other. And it describes a prophecy of the Mormon Church having a deluge that comes in and basically does a toilet flush wash. This valley in Utah, the Utah Valley and Salt Lake Valley, used to be a lake. It was called Lake Bonneville. And before that, it was a lake called Gosuit Lake. Another 500 feet deep was Gosuit Lake, which was probably from the receding of the waters from the flood of Noah. And when that emptied, probably created the Grand Canyon. And then the Bonneville Lake, when it receded, formed a canyon that went up through Idaho and into Oregon. And Gosuit Lake was 25,000 square feet. That was a lot of water that would be required to keep that thing full and not just be like the Dead Sea where it kind of goes up and down depending on the rainfall of the season. This was a full body of water with drainage. Right now, Salt Lake City is a dead body of water like the Dead Sea. that goes up and down with the sea, with the, whatever, whether it's a dry time or a wet time, but it doesn't go too much higher or lower. Maybe a decade ago, they had to do some buttressing of the roads because it was getting right up to the freeways and almost overlapping the freeways. That's the highest it got. They were talking about pumping the water into the desert to lower the level of the Salt Lake. But then it started getting drier, and now it's quite a bit lower than that. The Salt Lake is a dead body of water. It's full of salt because of that. It evaporates rather than drains off into the ocean. But at the time of the Lake Bonneville, this was a lake. You can see the shoreline as you go into the Utah and Salt Lake valleys. You can look upon the bench and you can see two shorelines. You see the Bonneville shoreline, which is right at the level of they call it the point of the mountain, which is a place between Utah and Salt Lake valleys as you're going along I-15. It makes this little hairpin turn as you're going from one valley to the other. And that is right at the level of Lake Bonneville. But if you look up on the bench, you see another shoreline, and that was Gosuet Lake. Those bodies of waters were supplied by some kind of aquifer that now is underground, that goes to either to the Pacific or to the Gulf Stream. I believe it goes to the Gulf, a huge underground aquifer. What's going to happen is there's going to be a big earthquake, and that's going to be blocked, and that water is going to come overland again, and there's going to be a tilting of the ground. Many people envision that the Salt Lake Temple is half submerged in water before this starts draining out again. There's a prophecy in Revelations that talks about the woman, that there shall be water that come after the woman, and then the earth shall swallow the water to preserve the woman. There's going to be a toilet bowl flush, and that parallel between Isaiah 28 and 2 Nephi 28 spells that out. That's not the only thing it talks about. There's 3 or 4 corresponding verses that address that. It calls the Mormon church the great and abominable church. It calls them the ones who are supposed to be a light to the world and the saviors of men. It calls them the great and abominable church because they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're in bed with the enemy, supporting the enemy instead. And it lines those things right up. Right out of the Book of Mormon, calls the Mormons the great and abominable church. When you line it up with 2 Nephi 28, you can see why the Mormons aren't talking about this and why I haven't been invited on Mormon radio stations.
To continue with that thought, I want to reference something you wrote on your website. It says, I have a very special place in my heart for the Book of Mormon and have felt for many years that one of my primary God-ordained missions is in this life is to show how the Book of Mormon and the Bible work harmoniously along with the Spirit of God to proclaim truth and prepare us to endure faithfully through the trying times that are ahead as Babylon falls and Zion is established in power. Can you explain what you meant by this statement in a little bit more detail? And also, unless you've already stated in the previous answer, why do you believe that the Book of Mormon is so important?
The Book of Mormon is to the modern world what the Bible was to the time of Christ. It is the Word of God, and it's not literal as in every word is exactly right. You have to go with spirit. But in terms of guidance from God, it is the foreordained oratory from God to his people at this time. And it is not intended to be the last word. There's going to be more that's going to be coming. And that's where these chiasms and parallels fit in. They're like the modern parables, like in the time of Christ, he spoke in parables. The chiasms and the parallels and the alphabetics are modern parables to the Lord's people that they're ignoring, as Jesus' disciples did in his day. They didn't get it. They just did not get it. Even his best apostles were part of denying him when push came to shove. And we're in the same environment nowadays where even the most enlightened don't see everything for what it is. The blinders are put on. There's a lot of awakening going on, but there's still a lot of blindness that's going on. And so What better commentary on Scripture than another Scripture? If I've got a whole chapter, Isaiah 28, that's paralleling 2 Nephi 28, you would think that everyone would be paying attention, but they ignore it.
So does that address the? Well, I'm curious about the first part of the statement there, that the trying times that are ahead as Babylon falls and Zion is established in power. Are you referring to something specific there, or just in general?
Babylon is a metaphor for the world and worldliness. United States, if you were taking a little more literal meaning, it would be the fall of the New World Order and the establishment of a freedom-based world entity that prophecy has actually emerging primarily from the Utah area as the remnant of the Mormons who wake up and put on strength, then carry forth that banner of freedom and promulgate that to the world finally, like they're supposed to do. But there are patriots and freedom lovers throughout the world who also will be playing that role, who've never had anything to do with Mormonism and never will, and yet they're part of God's work. So I don't see Mormonism as being something that is a prerequisite to any kind of spiritual walk with God. It's it does have its role prophetically, and a role that unfortunately is being blundered by the people who call themselves by that name, just as the Jews did at his time. The Jews were supposed to be preparing for the first coming, and instead they crucified him. And the Mormons are going to do the same thing. And then it's going to be taken back to another people, just like the kingdom was taken from the Jews and given to the Gentiles when the Jews rejected it. Same thing's going to happen in our day. And we're kind of in the crux or in the middle of all of that going on, this new world order that is just about fully entrenched and established worldwide. We are not yet, I don't think, to the full mark of the beast where no man can buy or sell except he take the mark of the beast. But we're awfully close. And so in terms of the role of Mormons and the Book of Mormon, I see it as being very important, but I don't see it as a necessarily a prerequisite for anyone who wants to have anything to do with the emerging Zion or God's kingdom on earth that's going to be established, which will be both a government and a gospel working in harmony. Because as you read through the scriptures and the prophecies, both the Bible and the Book of Mormon and others holy writings, it describes, in one verse, you might be talking about an individual salvation principles, and the next chapter might be the next verse might be talking about more of a communal, societal type of principle, and it doesn't even pause to go to make a transition between the two, as if they're the same principles in both. And that's why in our last interview I said something to the effect that we get the government we deserve. That the government is an outgrowth of the choices we as a people have made, and we have chosen wickedness, and we are reaping captivity and tyranny, and that's where free energy comes in as an antidote to that. Because as people, free energy is both an empowering force to get you to have the tools to grow into your godhood, so to speak, to become the person you're here to be. Because you're no longer tied to the system. You don't have to work for the man, because you now have a free energy device that's powering your house. You can grow your own food. You can drive your car as far as you want without stopping for fuel. You can fly your plane as far as you want without stopping. That's freedom. And we don't deserve that right now. We deserve tyranny. And there are some people individually who deserve freedom. And I think at first these free energy devices are going to go to those pockets, so to speak, to the preppers, to the preparedness communities, to the people who are building Earth ships and things like that. They're the ones that are most likely to be the early adopters. And once a consciousness shift takes place, a sufficient consciousness shift of society, an awakening, then it can go to society as a whole.
Okay, I want to elaborate on that and kind of bring back some of the different ideas we discussed earlier, and then ask you a question that is probably more philosophical than it is based on Alphabetics. But anyway, so going back to your earlier example of demonstration you did with the washers at the conference, when you swung one washer, the other washer that was similar started to match the movement of the first one. And then if we combine that idea with your example of cymatics, where the sound frequency causes a certain pattern to form in the sand, bringing these two ideas together, we're living in a world with various energies that are causing our reality, some low consciousness, some higher. And by your example, people who are of a lower consciousness will resonate when they're impacted by the lower frequencies of consciousness. But the higher consciousness individuals will not react to these low frequencies, and at the same time they will resonate or move with the higher frequency energies and probably won't even notice the lower consciousness energies. Am I on the right track so far?
Yeah.
Okay. So in your opinion, how do the people of lower consciousness stop resonating with the lower consciousness energies and start moving to the higher consciousness, and then move into this group of people that you were mentioning earlier are going to benefit from free energy technologies and so on?
One word: awake. That's the scriptural terminology for the answer to your question. Isaiah says, awake, awake, put on strength, O Zion, put on the beautiful garments, O Jerusalem. That's Isaiah 53, Messianic prophecy. I put it to song. I put it to music so I could remember it. I memorized the whole chapter. Well, actually, I've got halfway through the chapter. I haven't finished doing the whole chapter to music. But that's also cited in the last chapter of the Book of Mormon, Moroni 10. Also repeats that, says, awake, awake, put on strength, O Zion, put on the beautiful garments of Jerusalem. So waking up to our awful situation and doing what we can and putting on strength. Putting on strength. There's prophecies about one mighty and strong, which is 144,000. This quorum of people who put on strength with the Lord. They step into their godhood. They call down the powers of heaven. They step into their heavenly gifts. Whether it's interpreting languages or healing the sick or bringing out free energy devices or doing alternative healing modalities. They step into who they're supposed to be, and they recognize and acknowledge, and they're guided by spirit to do what they do in life on an ongoing, daily, even hourly basis. They don't do anything but that they're in tune with this universal oneness that they're part of. That is putting on strength. Where we actually step into our godhood. We are children of God, and our destiny is to be gods on earth and to create heaven on earth.
Obviously, a lot of people in the world are asleep and they don't know they're asleep. How does someone how do you foresee the masses of people who are in the majority at the moment, who are asleep but unconscious of the fact that they are? How do you foresee them actually waking up?
Well, in the principle of resonance, they will go one of two ways. They will either stay asleep because they choose to stay asleep. They choose to ignore the warnings that are all around them. That all the videos that have been produced about 911 being an inside job, they know about those. They're ignoring them. There's somebody overhear, or they overhear somebody in the grocery store talking about something, and they plug their ears and they stick their head back down in the sand. They are consciously choosing to stay asleep. And if they do that, they will be destroyed. This planet is going to rid itself of all telestial entities. 1 Corinthians, I think it is, talks about bodies telestial, terrestrial, and celestial. The telestial are those who are murderers and who love to lie and to take advantage of each other and to murder and to steal into wars, and that's telestial. And that is going to go away. We are going to be enough and through with wars. We're going to go into a higher level, and the wicked are going to destroy themselves. And so if they choose to not wake up, they're basically choosing by default to be destroyed, either to destroy themselves by the sword of their own hand shall fall upon their own heads, or by the calamities that come, or the earth is going to be consumed by fire. There is going to be a baptism of fire of this planet, like there was in the days of Noah. There was a baptism of water. we're going to have a baptism of fire, and it's going to be literal. Probably a coronal mass ejection that's going to come, is going to hit the Earth, going to wipe out our infrastructure, the electronic infrastructure, going to toast the planet. Those who are awake are probably going to be lifted up above the cloud. And this is what people refer to as a rapture. It's not pre-tribulation, I promise you that. This is the last thing that happens when everything is all said and done, when it's the final step of refining and perfecting the planet. Then everything that is left will be consumed by fire, and then those who've been lifted up will come back down, like in the days of Noah, the family of Noah, who repopulated the earth and started things over again. Those who've been lifted up, whether it's in spacecraft, UFOs, whether it's some other thing, they're going to come back down. They're going to rebuild and reseed and re-technologize, re-implement our technology, and we're going to have a wonderful, glorious world for 1,000 years, according to prophecy, living in peace on this planet.
Is it possible that the lifted up could be referring to something not quite so literal, but maybe those who of a higher consciousness may somehow be immune to the effects of a coronal mass ejection, as an example?
Could be. I know if I had the budget, we would be able to build a society and structures that would be EMP proof and even fireproof. So it is conceivable that there will be some people who will be able to ride out the storm. I'm guessing that we'll see two things at once. We'll see a coronal mass ejection, and we'll also see a pole shift where the Earth's axis will actually alter, and we'll have massive earthquakes and tectonic plate movement. The kinds of things that make the mountains in Utah. As you look at these things, that did not happen over millions of years. That was a cataclysmic event that caused those mountains to buckle in a matter of probably hours or days, not weeks. And we're probably going to see some kind of a earth shift where the earth is going to go through a huge upheaval. And that's going to create, to be able to survive that, to be on the planet, it's going to take some pretty heavy-duty engineering to be able to have your structure endure the heat and the vibration and the destruction from collapsing winds and things blowing 300 miles an hour by you. This is not going to be a place that you're going to be able to survive easily. But it's conceivable that there could be some pockets that could survive.
Well, the only reason I ask that is because I'm surrounded by lots of very interesting people such as yourself, and I've had for example, a dowser, very experienced dowser whose background is in testing for electromagnetic fields and so on, and he came to my house and he identified all the geopathic stress zones and EMF zones even outside my house. And what we found was when I stand on any of those zones, they neutralize. And so now that's just could be something unique to me, but I'm sure there are other people in the world too who may have energy fields who that are in some way protecting them from adverse frequencies in their environment or and so on. So that's why I was wondering if, for example, if it was a coronal mass ejection, possibly if people were of a sufficient consciousness, they would be able to overcome that or wouldn't even notice the adverse effects of it.
Yeah. Let's talk for a second along those lines about probable futures, because I really believe that there's a whole gamut of from horrific to not so bad that we could go through as a civilization, depending on how much we wake up and get our act together, or that we have to be, woken up through cataclysms and wars and famines and people eating each other and our infrastructure being shot and coronal mass ejections knocking out the power grid. There's a lot of different probable futures that could come into play. Who's the one who's pulling the triggers on whether or not we're hit by an asteroid or a meteorite, something that could have a dinosaur level extinction event? You and I know that we are 100 years or less away from technology to be able to go out into our known solar system and to be able to move asteroids out of position so they don't hit us. So you know that there are angels and beings from other systems, other solar systems, other galaxies who are watching us, who have the ability to pull the triggers and to push the strings one way or the other. And so you can call that God, that they're part of the God essence. They're working under this principle of these universal truths. And they have on their higher level opposing forces that are fighting against them. I mean, the fight doesn't end when humans finally evolve into the millennial reign that is a few years away for us. There continues to be this battle between good and evil. I think it's part of the opposition in all things that is part of this yin-yang dynamic that kind of helps us grow. By having the evil, we desire the good. Necessity is a mother of invention. And so certainly there are extraterrestrial or at a most mundane level, but I would put them on the classification of what we call God, people who are working for God, who have the ability to say, no, I don't think we need to do the full pole shift. I think that they've woken up enough. Let's just do a little earthquake. Let's have this small meteor come by. Or no, these guys are just totally ignoring the prophetic warnings. They're not getting it. They're not waking up. They deserve the full gamut. I mean, they deserve the full barrage and the full weight of their decisions and just knock them out of the sky. Full impact, meteors, smash, we're gone. And everything in between those two extremes. It is all about our choice. It's all about whether or not we choose to wake up and to step into our godhood and step into our hand in hand with God, becoming God creatures. And I mean, what did Jesus say? What manner of men ought ye to be, even as I am? Greater things than these shall ye do also. He was not sent here to be set on a pedestal that is untouchable. He came as a role model. We can implore the same gifts and talents and abilities that he exemplified and even surpass what he did. That's our destiny. That's what we have. When you talk about stepping around these little zones in your house and it neutralizes this EMF thing that's going on, that's a gift. That's a gift of the Spirit. And it's something that you've been endowed with, and other people are going to also have this ability. They can dial it in if they want, or they can have somebody else who's got that gift dialed in to come and do things for them. We're meant to work together as a team. To none of us are meant to be an island to work all alone. The body of Christ, we're supposed to be working together as a team, and to benefit from each other's gifts. And to we don't grow and progress unless we're helping other people.
Okay. Oh, that's a great explanation. Thank you for that. So I want to go back to Alphabetics. What are some of unless you've already stated them, what are some of the most interesting discoveries you've made in your study of this field?
Probably, I mean, like I said, I found thousands of correlations. A lot of having to do with myself, things that I've looked up for myself. Some of them I've written up, some of them I haven't. But from a public consumption point of view, one of the most exciting is the zip code of the LDS Church headquarters in Salt Lake City, 4150. They have their own zip code, like the Vatican, where they're like this, the headquarters, the temple, the tabernacle, the headquarters, the assembly hall. This is where the Mormon prophets get together for their little meetings twice a year, and they give these general conferences to the Mormon community at these 2-day events, and they have their own zip code, 84150. And so I looked up word number 4150 in the Old Testament lexicon, and I'm going to read you this. I'm reading verbatim from Gesenius's Hebrew Chaldee Lexicon to the Old Testament, which was first published like 150 years ago. This thing is old, okay? And this is long before they even had such a thing as zip codes. So this is word number 4150 in the Old Testament lexicon. A set time, a point of time. Vision belongs to a time. An assembly, that would correspond to the assembly hall. The tent of the assembly, the holy tabernacles, called the tabernacle of the covenant. They actually call that building there the tabernacle, a Mormon tabernacle choir, right? And then here is on definition number 3, place in which an assembly is held of the temple. They specifically mention the temple. The Mormon temple is on this headquarters zip code, temple. Seat of the prophets, an appointed sign, a signal. That definition, of all the definitions in the Old and New Testament, has the closest relevance to what happens on that zip code, and it happens to have the same number.
Was there anything else? Any other interesting discoveries?
Oh, we could go on and on
Okay.
and on this stuff.
All right. Well, now you mentioned earlier that you can't really use Alphabetics, or that you don't find it to be very useful in forecasting the future. Is that correct?
That's been my experience, yeah. I see it as being more intended as a commentary to get us to think and to wake up and to see things more clearly, and to be as a guide than something set in stone that such and such is going to happen on such and such a day. But that said, let me read you what word number 2015 is in the New Testament lexicon. An appearing appearance is spoken of the first advent of the Lord Jesus. Antonym, word number 666. I'm not making this up. That's next year.
I see. And so how do you interpret that?
I see that as being there's a possibility that there will be the beginnings or a major event that could happen in the year 2015 that could have to do with inaugurating the new kingdom of heaven on earth, and that there could be an appearance to a select group of people in a select area, not to the world in general yet, that could happen on that year. Or I could be completely wrong in terms of any correspondence to years. But it's interesting that if you take A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z in all caps, and you take the ASCII value of it, it also totals 2015.
So you're talking about some kind of a return of the Christ energy next year.
Could be.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. If there's an intended correspondence between years in this region of I can tell you that up to about 2000, I actually wrote this up and got it on my website. By the way, we haven't given the website. If you go to alphabetics.me, that's a shortcut to our coverage at greaterthings.com on this stuff. I found a correspondence between words 1993, which was when I was born, through the year 2000 in the New Testament lexicon that the word definition describes what happened in my life on that year, for whatever that's worth and whatever that means.
I know you're involved in a lot of things. Obviously, I am as well, and so I'm aware of a lot of amazing things that are just on the verge of making their way out to the mainstream. Even the whole legal system is in the process of being restructured in the United States and various other countries to a system that is much more fair and free. So in a way, and obviously you're seeing free energy technologies just on the verge of hitting the mainstream as well. So it seems to me that the kingdom of heaven on earth it could be sort of signified by all of these various breakthroughs and awakenings happening in the world in through different ways coming to the world. And I think that's, it's on the verge of happening any day, really. So it could very well be next year, as an example. Could that also be a representation of that, do you think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you have any opinion, and this may not have to do with Alphabetics or anything you've seen as a result of that, but if you have seen any correlation, then I would like to have you point that out. But do you foresee the future of any kind of future as far as the future of the governmental legal system, Federal Reserve, and so on in the United States?
My understanding from a prophetic point of view, which has been growing and being augmented over the years, because remember, I wrote this book, Vision of All, back when I was 25, and I'm now 50. So I've had, another lifetime, so to speak, since then to reflect on this and think about it and correspond it with what I see in the real world, in the news as it's unfolding. And my understanding is that the general outline that's described in Revelations and in Daniel is going to happen. The question is how severe. We're going to have this implementation of a new world order, world domination of tyranny that is actually being fostered and promulgated primarily by the United States of America at the by the okay of the Mormon Church and the other Christian churches in the United States, who go along and to get along and are not fighting it like they should. And they're going to be culpable for that. They're going to have to answer for that. They are rejecting God politically by doing that. They're rejecting the principle of freedom as it pertains to governments and nations by supporting the New World Order tyranny that is coming upon us. And the United States is the beast spoken of in Revelations. That is the primary organ that is going to bring about world slavery, the United States of America in its evil form. There's going to be an awakening that's going to happen in the United States, in Utah, and elsewhere in the world, where there's going to be a subset called the remnant in prophecy. Isaiah refers to them as the remnant, who wake up, put on strength, and do what they can to stand in the gap and to, despite the blindness that is around them, they prove themselves to be true valor and to be true warriors for God. And when I say warriors, I'm not talking about swords and killing. I'm talking about standing and being courageous and not backing down in the face of these bullies who are trying to enslave us. And these warriors are going to be tried to the ultimate degree. And at the end of a 3.5-year period of this captivity, there's going to be some kind of event that's going to happen that is going to be a galvanizing event that is going to basically be the lowest point in our morale that would be comparable to a woman giving childbirth and going through transition, which is the most painful, most difficult. Right before the baby comes out, she's going through transition. You can give her medications and stuff. It's not going to help at that point. She's already to that point. It's like, I can't do this. We're going to be hitting that point at the end of that 3.5-year period where it seems like all is lost. The world is given over to this new world order. Somehow there's going to be a turning to God of a core group, and God is going to come in, and there's going to be a Pentecost type of deliverance where there's going to be a miraculous deliverance, both spiritually and possibly even temporally, whether it's, UFOs coming down and lifting us off a planet that's about to be toasted or what. But there's going to be some kind of a deliverance from that captivity. And it's going to be spoken of prophetically as being more significant than the children of Israel being delivered from the clutches of Egypt and Pharaoh. The miracles that are going to happen in our deliverance are going to be so phenomenal that, and as we look back at this period of time and how blind we were, it's going to keep us awake for 1,000 years, because the commentary on how bad things are right now and how obvious it was and how stupid we were is going to keep us awake for 1,000 years. But that awakening is going to happen at the end of the 3.5-year period of captivity, and of being under the subjection of this New World Order tyranny. And then we rise up, and there will be deliverance. That's the way I see it. That's what I've got in the vision of all, our past, present, and future, as foretold in Book of Mormon history. The chiasms and parallels bear that out. Alphabetics bears that out. There is going to be the emergence of a new kingdom, of a new thing. It's not going to be a fixing of the United States of America. It's going to be a new entity that arises, that is the United States of America will have given birth to it. It's this kingdom of God that is born, the man-child that is born in Revelation, that comes out of the woman. That's going to happen, and that's going to be, I think we're just a few years away from all that stuff coming. We may be months away from the beginning of that 3.5, or we could actually already be in the middle of it. I can't point to any event that says this is the beginning yet. Maybe that I've overlooked something, but things are bad enough now in terms of the level of tyranny that I'm just aghast at how people are just going along with this, and they're not waking up and fighting against it. There are people who are, like yourself and others, who are awake and are doing the best they can. And they're going to be tried like silver in the refiner's fire. And, the noble ones, so to speak, the ones mighty and strong, who then bring forth this new kingdom of heaven on earth after this period of purging and proving, they're going to be phenomenal individuals. And that world, I think, will emerge in a matter of months, where we'll actually be having cities of light on the planet, where we are impervious to any kind of wickedness, corruption. We're going to have some amazing pockets of people around the planet, on all continents, I would guess. There will be people who have gathered together and have, who are pulling down the power of God and are creating their own food, who have free energy devices that are powering their stuff, who have basically a heaven on earth type of existence. It's not going to take years or decades to get to that. That's my take.
Yeah, and with my background in cycles, I would tend to agree with you. There are a lot of cycles that are happening now that would really represent that 3.5-year period that you were talking about. And I think that between now and the mid-2040s, we're going to move faster and faster into that, into a more ideal world where we have those kinds of energy technologies and more freedom for the people. So I do see that coming, but we're sort of in the pressure cooker period right now, the very difficult period that I think will start to break when we get into and past 2016. So, but it won't be till the next decade and beyond that we really move forward dramatically. But I do see that, and so that's interesting that you are also seeing that period of time, and it somewhat seems to line up with what I found.
Look at the level of awakening that has happened globally because of Edward Snowden. Some people say he's, CIA asset and he's doing some pre-programmed thing, and, that may be true, but look at the effect it's having, the dialogue that it's having, and the way that people are, something that used to be out of their consciousness is now fully in their consciousness, and they're having to make a choice about it. And with the modern age of electronics, things could happen at really fast speed to get people to think in a different way, to wake up, to change their hearts. I mean, all you have to do is go to a weekend seminar and you can become a different person. And if you had some kind of, internet presentation that just struck everyone to the core, You know, now you've got a bunch of new creatures walking around, and those who choose not to go that direction, you know, they end up killing each other off or whatever. But there is going to be a ridding of the planet of all things telestial. There will, for 1,000 years, there will be no wars, no crime, no. It's going to be a terrestrial to celestial level. There will be pockets of celestial with terrestrial, which is really amazing. I mean, when people die and see heaven, they're basically seeing a terrestrial existence, and that's what's going to be on the earth. And so, you know, that we are at the end of this telestial, and the New World Order is the culmination of the kingdom of devil on the earth coming to its full grandeur and is about to collapse. But I want to, if I could, since we've been talking about Alphabetics and we've been talking about free energy, I'd like to just give you a brief taste of a presentation that I did. I made reference to it earlier in Boulder back in October about Alphabetics as it pertains to energy. There is a series of words, definitions in the New Testament lexicon, and starting in the region of 1776, which, of course, people think of, that's the American Revolutionary War. That's when it started. And here's the definition for word number 1776. To excite, disturb, trouble, annoy. Does that have anything to do with 1776? That's similar to your word definition, isn't it? And the word next one, subject to bondage. And then word number 1783, the year 1783 was when we had the treaty with Great Britain. This word means a falling in with, meeting with, coming together, intercession, prayer, addressing to God for oneself or others. That's relevant. That has resonance, wouldn't you say? And then 1783 was when the Constitutional Convention was held and when the Constitution was launched. This is really cool stuff. This is the definition for word number 1783. And remember, we've been talking about how the kingdom of God is both individual, the first coming of Jesus, and collective, the second coming, the second messianic advent that has to do with freedom of nations. The first coming had to do with freedom of the individual through individual captivity to sin. Jesus came to deliver us from that. That was the first coming. The second coming is, the 1787, which is the word number, which is the year number for the Constitutional Convention. Let me read this definition for you. Within. The kingdom of God is within, meaning it is located in your heart and affections, not external. That is the quintessential definition of the first coming. And it's talking about what happened pertaining to the second advent. And this kind of cool intertwining of things is very typical in these chiasms and parallels in Alphabetics. Do you see what I'm saying there? Do you get the correlation?
Yeah, I do. It brings up another question, though, but I'll let you continue before I do that.
Well, I'm good. I can put a pause button right here if you want to go ahead and ask that.
Well, those dates make a lot of sense, and even from an astrology standpoint, there were a lot of similar things happening in the beginnings of the United States that I see again happening now and for the first time since then. And so there's a lot of similarity in terms of cycles in the time that we're in to the time back then. And so I'm wondering, are there any upcoming years that have a certain meaning in Alphabetics that are similar to the ones that you're referencing now?
There have to be. Absolutely. Yeah. And the one that we just read was, I think, a good example of that. Here's something else that I would note that's interesting, that this word definition is on page 594, which is, if you multiply that by 2, and when you talk about resonance, if you take a chord, or you take a note on the piano and you divide it in half, it goes up like an octave or something like that. I can't remember what the relationship is, but it goes into they call it a harmonic. And so if you multiply a number by 2, you're still in the principle of resonance. And 594 times 2 is 1189, which is the number of chapters in the Bible. So here's another stamp of endorsement on the principle of the Constitution and of freedom, that it corresponds through resonance in these numbers to the Constitutional Convention in the New Testament lexicon, the number that is associated with that. But I wanted to now tie this into freedom.
Yeah.
Really quick, I just want to note that the word just before 1785 is before 1787, word number 1785, just 2 words before it, is commandment, whether of God or man. And isn't that interesting that in this day when the Revolutionary War was over, the United States was in its formative stages, and they were discussing what kind of government are we going to have, that the word for 1785 is commandment, whether of God or man. And that again is a I think an endorsement, a resonant endorsement of the whole principle of the Constitution and of freedom and the significance of what happened in the founding of this nation.
Have you ever found that Alphabetics came up with something that didn't make any sense or wasn't really relevant to what you were trying to interpret? And also, if so, how do you make sense of those results?
I would say that as a rule, almost every time you look something up, your first impression is that it doesn't have relevance. And then as you look at it and you think about it and you start looking at some of the, sometimes there can be things thrown in there. For example, the name of one of the etymologists that's cited. For example, we're just bringing up 1189, the number of chapters of the Bible. I think it's in the Old Testament lexicon, word number 1189 describes, let me just pull this up here to make sure. No, that's not it. But there's a word definition that ties into this whole idea of the number of chapters, whether it's in the New Testament or the Old Testament, and you take that word number. It describes Rossi, which is the name of one of the top 5 technologies in our top 5 energy technologies listing. It has Celsius, which is the idea of temperature raising and lowering through cold fusion process, and the water bath that is elevated to then run through a turbine to turn a generator. It has to gather together, which is the idea of fusion. There are 5 different definitions in that one word that tie into Andrew Rossi's cold fusion technology. And it also happens to be the number of chapters in either the New Testament, Old Testament, or both. I can't remember which. Which is like an endorsement stamp. I mean, we're talking ROSSI or something like this. It's almost identical spelling. There's like 1 letter's off by 1. It's a like if, you know, for example, your Ethann could be spelled a lot of different ways. You put 2 N's on it. You could spell it with 1 N, and it was that close to the name Rossi. And it was the name of an etymologist, and that word's been in there for 100 years or more. And again, the word Celsius is another etymologist, has nothing to do with temperature. So there's these plays on words because of the principle of resonance that come in. And so I have never, ever looked something up and given enough time looking at it, have not found something that's relevant. And this is not just twisting things like, you know, you could look at a cloud and see a skyscraper, or you could make anything that you want out of a cloud. It's not that kind of thing. It's like there's a point of resonance where you see something, you go, this is it right here. It was like hidden. It's like that hidden picture that you see the man pulling the cart, and you look at this picture of a forest for a long time, and then finally you see it and it jumps out. It's that kind of thing.
So can Alphabetics be used to forecast or better understand an individual's life journey, or is it primarily applicable in global events, do you think?
Both. In fact, I would argue that its most significant purpose is individual, but that it applies to both.
And so how can somebody benefit from this understanding in their day-to-day lives?
You can go to the lexicon, look up your phone number, look up your address, look up your social security number, look up the date you were born. For me, 1163, for example, November 63 would be one number I would look up. You could insert your name alphabetically and see what the words before and after it have to say in the Greek and in the Hebrew. Because again, this principle of dialing into like the old radio where you go to the channel and then the words before and after it have relevance. You take your name, Ethann, and you spell that in Greek, and then you insert it in the Greek lexicon and you look at the words around it. And then you look up Fox and you look the same thing. You just transliterate it into Greek, translate it into Hebrew, and see what the commentary is. Look up your friend's stuff. Look up somebody you want to do business with. It's like same thing as horoscopes. You look at, what color's your parachute. You look at different people's colors and what kind of rules or is consistent or predominant in their life. And you say, well, this color is not consistent with this one. That guy might be a great person, but he's not going to work with our company right now with who we have here. You can do this. You can use this Alphabetics in the same way.
And are these resources, you speak of the lexicon, are these resources on your website, or how would somebody do that? Or do you suggest that they start this as a main focus of study to gain the understanding that you have?
Well, I mean, to get the understanding I have, I was immersed in this for several years. So, it can be a while before you get to that point. But to have enough, you need to be careful. Like I said, you need to be careful in not reading too much stuff into it. And you don't want it to say, okay, should I date this girl? Should I not? And this says this, and therefore I should. You don't want to put it on that level of decision making. Yes, take it as input, but spirit should be your guide. The resonance with your soul and with higher consciousness, that should be your guide. Your conscience, that should be your guide more than anything else. If you read something in Alphabetics and it says go kill your neighbor, that's probably that most definitely is not what you should be doing. You go with your conscience.
So how much study is necessary for someone to even start working with the basics, like your phone number or your name or something like that?
Here's an analogy. I got my website, pezwiki.com, which is the energy stuff that we do. And I learned in the first 2 hours at Wikipedia about 80% of what I know to this day. Everything else has been the details of how to put things in the headers and the banners and all that stuff, things that most people don't need to know. So the lay level of understanding, probably listening to this tape or this presentation is enough to get you started.
And where would we find these lexicons as a reference to look this up?
Go to your local Christian bookstore, or even a regular Barnes & Noble should have it. Just look up, go ask for a Bible lexicon. They'll have a New Testament one is Greek, Old Testament one is Hebrew. You'll also want to get what's called a concordance, which is so you can look up words in English. You say, what's the word for love in Hebrew? And I go to my Strong's Concordance, the Strong's Exhaustive Concordance of the Bible. And he's the one who numbered all the Old and New Testament words. And these are his numbering is what is used by all these other lexicographers like Zodiates that I'm using and Gesenius in the Old Testament. So James Strong is a name to remember. And getting these are available extantly. You can find these probably in any bookstore, any major bookstore will have this. And you look up the word for love, and it says in Matthew such and such, it uses word number 20, whatever it is. And it gives you the word number that you then look up that word number in the New Testament lexicon, and it gives that definition for that particular permutation of love. There may be 5 different words for love that we translate love into English into the New Testament. Some cases they're just a single word. There's an identity between the Hebrew word and the English word. And so there's just one word that you have to look up. But sometimes there's 20 different words for a single word in English. That you have to then, you have to go to the exact chapter and verse that you're wanting to look up. What is the word long in Exodus 19, verse 18? It's word number 4900. So what the lexicon, what the concordance enables you to do is to go the other way. If you want to look up a word in English and to see its relevance in the older New Testament lexicon, this is your directories to do that. But the reason, rather than recommend that you get the one that I'm using Zodiades in the New Testament, the Complete Words Study Dictionary of the New Testament by Zodiades. Rather than saying get the same one I did because that's the only one that works, I'm not going to say that. There may be one that you are destined to find that it's going to have the best resonance with you, and just by going to your local bookstore and getting whatever they have on hand is your best chance of finding the resonant for you.
I don't quite follow how you take a name and you translate it into a number. Obviously, the name Ethan is not going to be in the Bible, right?
Right. What you do is you could go to Google Translate, or actually you want to go to a transliteration. You don't want a translation, you want a transliteration where you take the literal letter for letter equivalent in Greek for Ethan. So E, there's a TH theta, and then A would be alpha, and N would be nu. That noon is the Hebrew. Whatever the name of the letter is for the N, nu in Greek. And you take that Greek transliteration and you look that up alphabetically. And you're going to need to know, I've got in my book, I've got a little chart that I printed out and have here for reference, where I take the English alphabet, I take the Greek alphabet and the Hebrew alphabet, and I list them in 3 columns in sequence. And so when I'm looking up a word, I can make reference to this because I don't have the Greek alphabet 100% memorized. I've got it mostly memorized, but not 100%. So I just take Ethan, translate it into Greek, and I can say, okay, that's going to be epsilon, and that's the 5th letter in the Greek. So I'm going to just start flipping through, and it's like looking up a word in the English dictionary. You go to the epsilon section, and then you go to the next letter. Once you find the epsilon section, then you go to theta, and you hone in on the letter theta, and then the alpha would be the next. And so you're going to be Ethan, or epsilon, theta, alpha, and you're going to insert that, and that's probably as far as you need to go because there's not going to be anything closer than that. I want to finish something really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
We were talking about the 1776. There's actually like 20 consecutive definitions in the New Testament lexicon that correspond year for year with things that happened on that year. I gave you some examples, but I actually did a write-up on this on my website. You can look it up. Just look up 1776 in Alphabetics and it'll pull up in Google. But right before that is, what that says is how significant freedom is in the whole prophetic, lexicon, alphabetics, parable point of view. This is like a huge stamp of endorsement of the founding of the United States of America. Was very, 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 very significant. Pay close attention to this, and the freedom that this gave birth to is very, very significant. Right before that is a word for energy. Putting energy and the idea of free energy in the same ballpark of significance. And that's what my presentation was in Boulder. And I went to a whole bunch of, I looked up the date that we had the conference. I looked up the address of the place where we were having the event. I looked up all kinds of things. I looked up the phone numbers, and it all tied into energy and the significance of the coming forth of these things at this time, and the prophetic significance of energy to the emerging of the kingdom of heaven on earth. And from a prophetic point of view, it all tied into Isaiah 53, which is a messianic prophecy, tied in almost every, several of the verses in that chapter had very strong correspondence with this study of the words and numbers pertaining to that conference and energy and the timing of the emergence of these things.
Do you teach any classes in this, or I assume your books reference these topics, but do you have any education programs, or if somebody wanted to learn more?
Basically, they would just have to go to my website and see the stuff that I found and then mimic that themselves. I don't have any classes per se. It might not be a bad idea. In fact, this lecture with you is going to be the closest thing anytime that to any kind of a presentation of what Alphabetics is about and how it works. So this would be something that I could link up on my site for people to refer to as an introduction to its significance, what it is, how it works.
Just in the grand scheme of things, or anything you want to add, how can we use the understanding of Alphabetics to change the world for the better?
Two things. Number one, by using it as a point of reference for yourself, you can improve your walk with God. And I mean, it's one thing to liken the scriptures to yourself and to read the Bible, to read the Book of Mormon, to read the Quran, whatever your sacred scripture is. It's one thing to read it and then to apply it to yourself. That's cool. But it's entirely different when you can look up your phone number and get a direct hit about stuff that's going on in your life. That's pretty cool. And I think it gives you more confidence in yourself, in your significance, in the direction you're going and the direction you need to go. I mean, listen to the Spirit as you're looking this stuff up. You're going to have impressions. Go with those. If something's just burning in the back of your mind, hey, you need to apologize to your wife about that thing that you did 2 years ago. Or whatever it is that's burning there, just take care of it. This. So it's going to help you become a better person. And then number two, it's going to help you understand the world around you. Could help you in your relationship with your fellow workers, with your boss, with your employees, with the potential customers, business partners. It could help you as a politician. It's a tool to help you both individually and in your interfacing with the world and understanding the world. There are going to be people, in addition to myself, who are going to be able to, get excited about this and use it and create websites that post the things that they've dug out and discovered and do their commentary on that other people can refer to. Not everyone has to dig through and find everything. They can benefit from the work that other people do. You read the work of religious scholars and you benefit from that. And people with spiritual gifts and gifts what would be really fun would be somebody such as yourself, for example, who comes along and does a correspondence between Alphabetics and horoscope. I'm sure there's going to be some very strong crossover between those disciplines. If you go and buy one of these lexicons for it's going to be $15 to $25, and you got to sit in there in your office as a reference book, and somebody calls you up and you're interested in maybe working with them, you just look up their phone number really quick. It's not going to hurt. You're just going to see something about that and you go, interesting. It might put a red flag on it. It might put a green light.
Yeah, I find that even to be true. A lot of times people come to me, for example, women who have been married numerous times, and I can go through each of their names and explain what each marriage was like. And it's really fascinating that you can do something like that, and it just makes complete sense in every case. And so seems like it's something that could add another dimension of understanding that I don't currently have.
You familiar with the book Know the Name, Know the Person?
No.
Yeah.
Numerology book?
It's not numerology. A lady named Susan, I believe, wrote it. I'm looking for my copies so I can give you the author's name. She's a friend of mine, really good friends with my mother-in-law. It's basically talks about how it doesn't go through name by name like a name book. It goes through the letter A. When it occurs in the middle of the name means this. When you have multiple instances of the letter E in your name, it means this. When you have the beginning consonant is K, here's what it means. It's very much like horoscope. And it says basically what you just said. Know the name, know the person. If you know their name, you can tell them what they're about. Got another book here called The Secret Language of Birthdays by Gary Goldschneider and Joost Elfers. Fascinating book. You look up your birthday and it gives you, and the way they did it, they didn't even use horoscopes to do this. They just took a collection of people born on that day and they did a cross section and came up with commonalities and wrote them down. And it's amazing how relevant it is.
I see astrology, numerology, what you're doing, Alphabetics, are all giving us a tangible way to understand our vibrational universe and to be able to make sense of it and also to find ways to remedy that. So, for example, like in my case, if I have a phone number that is going to cause an outcome that I don't want, then maybe I want to change to something better. But let's say I had a name or a phone number or something that translated into an outcome that I didn't like or that I didn't want to have, and I instead wanted this other outcome that had a different number and name and so on. Would it make a difference if I changed to that?
Yeah, I think it definitely would.
Have you ever tried that?
I haven't. I mean, if you're talking about like picking up and moving somewhere to a different address, that's pretty disruptive. So typically, you might use it in making a decision, should we move here or should we move there, and which number serves us better or feels better to us. But I would never use Alphabetics as the primary guiding force in your decisions. Only use it as input. Use it as a point of reference, as something that is interesting, that you weigh. I wouldn't use it as Alphabetics told me to.
See, I look at it as the chicken or the egg, really. Did I change my name and that changed my life, or was my life already going to change and so I changed my name? They both, I see it as they both came together in that moment in time, and the name change was just a representation of some future direction in my life that was already underway. And in the same way, I would look at Alphabetics. I changed my phone number around the same time as well. So was it the phone number change that caused the change, or was it already changing? Just a interesting way to look at it. But so I don't know that it would, if I were to change the Alphabetics of my life experience first and cause a change in my life, that it wasn't already going to happen.
Yeah, and I don't know if you could say that's a chicken and egg kind of question, but based on know the name, know the person, I know she will sometimes recommend that people change their names because the name is actually creating bad consequences in their life. They change their name and their outcome changes because of the name change.
I can totally agree with that. There are certain, in my work with numerology, sometimes somebody will come to me and they'll have a certain name, and looking at that name, I can look at their life, and especially if it's a woman whose name has changed numerous times through marriages, I can look at their life and tell them, well, this is the reason why you've had unsuccessful marriages, and in order to if you really want a more successful relationship, then you just need to change your name in this way. And I do make name change recommendations quite often for that reason, because yeah, a lot of people do have names that cause them suffering, and it's amazing how just that small change, which is kind of a big deal, it takes a lot of effort, but when you consider the repercussions across your life to changing a name, it's pretty big and worthwhile doing, I think. And I've noticed a dramatic change in how I experienced my life. I'm not sure that what I was going to experience really would have changed. I think I was always meant to do this at this time, but how I experience it has dramatically changed, and how people react toward me has dramatically changed. I had a very different life experience and very different way that people behaved toward me prior to changing my name. So it does make a difference.
Really quick, I'd just like to, as kind of a place of endorsement, so to speak, for Alphabetics, would point out that the spelling of alphabet, alpha is a Greek name for the first letter of the alphabet, alpha, and bet is the Hebrew name of the second letter of their alphabet. So the word alphabet is actually a hybrid of two languages, Hebrew and Greek. And the very first word in the New Testament lexicon is Ab, alphabet, father. Jesus in the garden said Abba, father. Actually, I take that back. That's in the Old Testament lexicon. The first word is Ab. So the very word father, Jesus was the first coming, and the second messianic advent has to do with the work of the Father. And you could also argue the work of the Mother. There would be a team effort. And so Alphabetics, from my understanding and experience, is a testament to the work of the Father and Mother in these end times in preparation for the new heaven and earth that are going to come. From a practical point of view and description point of view, I'm a wordsmith, and I like to name things accurately and use words accurately in my writing. Alphabetics is a study of the alphabetical sequence of words and the numbers associated with them and the meanings that are derived therefrom. And it's based on the alphabetical sequence. And it's not just the Old Testament, New Testament lexicons. The same thing is true you can get an English dictionary and insert your name alphabetically, and you can see the resonant thing picking up, or you can see the words before and after it having to do with that word. So Alphabetics is based on the word alphabet and the alphabetical sequence of words. And so that it happens to be the name of Ab, father, alphabet, alphabet, I think is very significant.
So is PezWiki something you chose intentionally, or what does it stand for?
PezWiki comes from Pure Energy Systems Wikipedia, so it was purely pragmatic, and I didn't consult or think about the alphabetics or the nemology ramifications when I chose that website. It was purely a hybrid of PES and Wiki.
Can you paint a final big picture of where you think we'll be as a world in about 25 years, and if you have any perspective? It doesn't have to relate to Alphabetics necessarily, because you're a man of many talents and background. So in terms of what will our day-to-day life be like, what it'll be like to live in society, will we live longer, so on, free energy devices, or anything valuable you think is worthwhile adding here?
Yeah, I would say that easily in 25 years from now, we will be in a new world. That wickedness and corruption will have been eradicated from the planet by choice and by calamities and self-destruction. And we will have a new world. We're going to have massive abundance, no more scarcity. Everyone's going to have enough. We'll be able to, the technology is going to be way beyond what we are now. And everyone will, when I say everyone, I would say most people will be doing what they love as opposed to working jobs that they hate, working to just barely eke out an existence. Painters will be painting, gardeners will be gardening, people who enjoy cleaning will be cleaning. It won't be mismatches of talents with available openings in the job market. And people will be very effective with their time. When people do what they love, they're 6 times more efficient and effective than they are when they do what they hate. And so imagine if the entire human population is doing what they love, what an incredible world that will be. We will have no more suppression of emerging remedies, of emerging free energy technologies, of emerging modalities. We will embrace and welcome new ideas and new approaches in the true scientific method of seeing a new observation and verifying it and optimizing it, characterizing it, and implementing it, rather than going with a dogma of saying, well, that breaks the laws of physics, therefore it must not be true. There must be something bogus there, and they look the other way. Everything that right now is upside down will finally be right side up. Love will be preeminent on the planet. Not that everyone's going to be on the highest level, but the planet is going to be on a much higher level than it is now. And it'll be like a night and day difference between what we will see 25 years from now and what we have on the planet right now, where we'll be eating healthily, our bodies will be fit and trim, we'll be able to run without walk and not be weary, run and not be weary, walk and not faint. We will be able to do phenomenal things as human beings. There will be a lot of really amazing people, not because they are different than they, I mean, not because a new batch of people has shown up on the planet, but because the people who are here are going to finally step into who they really are and stop being slaves and stop being, couch potatoes, being entertained by silly brain-numbing stuff. There will be phenomenal feats of music and of art and of engineering and of exploration. I think in 25 years from now, a trip to Mars will be like a trip to Paris from the United States now. You have to save up some money and it'll take some time. But it'll be something a lot of people are doing and wanting to do, and we'll be exploring, and we may even be to neighboring solar systems in 25 years from now. We're that close. It's arguable that we're already there. The black ops have that technology. A lot of the UFOs you see flying around are theirs, are our own making, the sequestered projects by the corrupt powers that be. So, turning that to peaceful uses, we could easily be exploring our neighboring galaxy, and the Star Wars, Star Trek kind of adventures being back to the Earth, and meanwhile, mining asteroids and rather than destroying the Earth, and raining in misdirected asteroids so they don't cause damage. All of that capability we have now, we just haven't implemented it yet. So, 25 years from now, I'll be 75 years old, and I'm looking forward to it. if only we can get there.
Sounds good. Well, you mentioned saving up money, so do you foresee us having a similar currency exchange at that point as well?
Yeah, I was using present vernacular. I'm guessing that our monetary system is going to be very different then. It'll probably be much more based on, maybe a Bitcoin type of operation, or we could be transformed into something completely different that we haven't even conceived of now.
Right.
But definitely there needs to be some major overhaul there.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much for taking time today. Can you tell our listeners how to get in touch with you and to follow your work, all the different things that you're doing these days?
For today's conversation, the main website would be greaterthings.com. And for my energy work, that'd be freeenergynews.com, that forwards to pezwiki.com. And my contact information is easily obtained from both of those sites. And I appreciate your having me on for this and giving me a chance to explore this topic for the first time in almost 20 years.
Yeah, it's very, very fascinating discussion. I'm looking forward to listening back to it again. But we'll talk again soon, and I'd love to have you back on talking about some other subjects in the near future.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Ethan.